During Ramadan, observant Muslims do not eat or drink between sunrise and sunset. If pregnant women observe this ritual, might there be an impact on their children's future prospects? New research uses tax records to identify the impact of fasting during pregnancy. Hello, Mazar.
Hello, Tim.
Mazar, there has been some fascinating fetal origins research in economics, hasn't there? What sort of questions can it ask and investigate?
Yeah, indeed, Tim. So there has been some fascinating research in the fetal origins literature. So one thing we now know for certain is that what happens in early life of children, so that matters a lot in terms of skills and abilities they develop, and in terms of how they fare in schools, colleges, universities, and labor markets. So the fetal origins literature takes this process a step back, and they say that this process of human skill formation, this begins early, right after conception. So the 9 months humans spend in utero is the most critical period in human skill formation, and any mild shocks during this period can have lasting impacts on the type of lives that these exposed individuals live. And so the fetal origins literature has been successfully documenting study after study, causally relating these in utero events to later life events of individuals.
But the distance between cause and effect, this is many, many, many years. So is it problematic to establish that causal link?
Yes, it is indeed the major empirical challenge. So the event we are talking about, these events take place while the humans are in utero, before birth, and we are measuring outcome a long distance after the event. So when they are adults in the labor market, for example, in our case, we are measuring earnings when they are adults. So there is a lot of time span in between the cause and the effect. And the lot happens in between, which we do not observe. And this includes parental investments, societal investments. So these investments could be compensatory, so they could be reinforcing. So on top of that, so what makes this empirical challenge even harder is that a lot of these shocks to the in utero environment that researchers can exploit, so they are very mild in nature. For example, if you take our case, Ramadan, so there's a deprivation of nutrition. But out of 9 months in utero, you experience this at the maximum for 4 weeks. So it's a mild shock. And then you were measuring outcomes after a long time. So then it's absolutely essential for a study of this kind to have two things. So one is that the outcomes, so must be measured with a lot of precision. So there should be no measurement error in the outcomes that you are measuring. And the second thing is you need to have a lot of statistical power. So which means large sample. And it's where the administrative data comes in handy. So now administrative data are being used by researchers for all type of researchers. And my sense is for this type of literature, it's absolutely vital that you work with administrative data where you have the power and precision needed to estimate the effect of this kind.
Yes, you have investigated the impact of Ramadan fasting by the pregnant mothers on the outcomes for their children as adults. Does that run into similar methodological problems, or does it have any advantages?
Yeah, this empirical challenge is there for this study as well. For starters, again, Ramadan is, as I said, is a mild treatment. And in our case, you experience it before birth and you measure earnings when you are adult, 30 years old, 40 years old. So there's a large time gap. So that's why, so I think we are lucky that we have access to very large administrative data set. We observe all earnings reported by income tax filers in Pakistan, and using this power and precision, that we are able to bring to the study. So we are able to estimate even the small effects, small changes, small variation between the exposed and unexposed children.
Medically, what's the assumption that we make about how the sort of fasting that occurs during Ramadan might affect the baby?
Yeah, so there are many channels which have been documented by biomedical literature. So baby is reliant completely on mother's blood for supply of nutrients. And when we say supply of nutrients, baby only feeds on glucose. So when the supply of glucose in mother's blood goes down because the mother is not taking food regularly, so then the mother's body turns towards the alternative metabolic process. So it turns on the alternative engine for energy, which is burning fat. So burning fat releases energy, so it's helpful, but its byproducts, ketones and fatty acids, so they have been shown to be like harmful for baby. On top of that, so there is like accelerated starvation. So accelerated starvation is a process that if a pregnant woman does not take food for between 14 to 18 hours, so then in terms of biomedical state, so their body can attain a state which is usually observed only in extreme episodes of starvation. So this is called accelerated starvation. And there is some evidence of accelerated starvation among pregnant Muslim women who are observing fast. On top of that, and perhaps more importantly, there could be like predicted adaptive responses. So our bodies are extremely intelligent machines. So the problem is a temporary reduction in nutrition. So body can misconstrue it as a permanent signal that food will be scarce after birth. And based on this signal, body can reprogram itself. So this is called fetal reprogramming. As a result of fetal reprogramming, so baby will acquire traits which will give it survival advantage in the food scarce environment. So it could be like there could be reduced muscle mass, so there could be increased fat storage, so there could be greater insulin resistance. So these traits, so they are great if the food is in fact scarce after birth. But when this disruption is temporary and the physiological changes that occur as a result of fetal reprogramming, they are permanent. So then there is a mismatch between the environment and the body. So body is optimized to function in low food conditions, but food is rich. In the type of societies we live, in fact, we are like live in a calorie rich societies, and then there could be like these reprogrammed bodies babies, so they could be like exposed to all kind of illnesses including type 2 diabetes and obesity and heart disease. Yeah.
And to estimate these effects, as you say, you need high power. You've got administrative data here, haven't you? How comprehensive is this data? How far back does it go?
We use administrative data, as you said. So this is all income tax returns filed in Pakistan for 3 years, 2007, 2008 and 2009. And so this is like around 5% of the population, but mostly the top end of the income distribution who file income tax returns. And as I said, for a study of such a kind, so what you need is a lot of statistical power and precision. And this data affords us that. So we are able, so because we observe both earnings and other economically relevant variables, such as occupation choice and other, and we can relate it to like the prenatal events, which is Ramadan exposure in our case, because we also observe date of birth of these individuals. So then we are able to create a long panel. So where we have like more than 66 birth cohorts, people born in 66 different years. We observe their date of birth, we can measure their Ramadan exposure, and then we can causally relate it to their earnings. While they're adults, we can look at also the mechanisms which drive their earnings or any effect on earnings.
And for most expectant mothers, I would imagine their pregnancies would overlap at some point with Ramadan. Did you manage to detect an effect? Is that effect larger for particular months of pregnancy?
Yeah, so what we find is that the effect is like significant. So any kind of Ramadan exposure in any period of pregnancy, it has an effect. So we can rule out that it has no effect. So then if you look at different pregnancy months, so then we get a U-shaped profile. So where the effect is smaller when the exposure is in the initial months of the pregnancy, then it goes down, which means effect becomes larger. So the effect is maximum if the exposure is in months 3 to 5 of the pregnancy, and then it kind of like again goes up, which means reduces in size.
How large is this effect at its maximum?
So we are estimating that at the minimum, so our estimate is lower bound is like 3%. So the earnings of exposed individuals are 3% lower than the unexposed. But this could be like, so depending upon the fasting rate, which means number of days of Ramadan that mother fasts. So this could be large. This could be like even 9% for some individuals.
Yeah, in the fetal origins literature, a large part of every paper is about the possible confounding effects. And I suppose the same applies here, isn't it? Are things like seasonality, income effects, any other factors like that could confound this research?
Yes, seasonality is important because we know from other evidence that children born in various calendar months, they are not similar. So they have different parental characteristics and also other types of characteristics. So the good thing about Ramadan is that it does not follow the solar calendar. So it follows lunar year. And lunar year is shorter than the solar year by 11 days. So if Ramadan comes on 31st May this year, so next year it will start on the 20th May, 11 days early. So in this way it cycles around the solar year, and in 33 years it completes the cycle. So which means if you have 33 birth cohorts in your data, which means people born in 33 different years in your data, so then you can control for this birth seasonality. And we are lucky that we have like 66 birth cohorts in our data, so then we can control for this seasonality like convincingly. So you said income is also like an important confounder in the sense if rich parents, so they are able to limit or eliminate the exposure of their children to Ramadan. So then the fact that we document this could be just an artifact of that poorer children of parents, so they were exposed to Ramadan, and the children of richer parents, they were not exposed. So we look at it in detail and we find that there is like no sorting of parents along this line. So Ramadan exposure is not correlated with any of the parental characteristics. So the timing of pregnancy is almost as random as it could be. It's like randomly assigned.
This is a large effect, especially as you say, because you consider it to be a lower bound. In the aggregate, then, for countries with large Muslim populations, can we estimate some kind of aggregate effect?
Yes, so we can do some back of the envelope calculations. So children born in 9 out of 12 months, so they would be exposed. So potentially 75% of the population is exposed. And if you take that 2/3 of the GDP represents labor share, and you apply even the most conservative estimate from our paper, so then it means that Pakistan loses almost $2.4 billion a year because of this exposure alone. And this is very conservative estimate. And if you extrapolate this to like global Muslim population, so then the global output loss because of this exposure is around $13.8 billion. So the numbers are not trivial, so they are like huge.
This is a very strong effect, both on an individual and, as we say, on that aggregate level. then. So on this evidence, there is economic evidence that pregnant women should not fast during Ramadan. Would that be at all compatible with religious teaching, though?
So it would be. So our reading of the religious teachings is that all major schools of Islamic jurisprudence, so they allow pregnant women to skip the fast if they feel, if the if the mother feels that it would be harmful, that doing so would be harmful to them or the baby. And now there is like a lot of evidence from medical literature, also from research by social scientists, that it does have like harmful consequences for the babies. So I think the correct interpretation of religious teachings would be that these pregnant women, they should postpone. So there is no absolute exemption. So they should postpone fasting till the time that they have already given birth to the baby.
And that means that there is a possible policy solution to this, then, which is to make people aware of what that is possible.
Yeah, it seems like a free lunch in the sense that there is like, as I said, in Pakistan alone, so there is an aggregate output loss of $2.4 billion a year. And the intervention that you are proposing is not going to cost any money. It's just you are educating women that don't fast at the time you are pregnant. Please fast when you have already given birth. So this seems like a very, there seems to be like clear Pareto gains to be made through like efficient, clever policy interventions. But of course, so these are like protected beliefs. So when it comes to religion, identity, so then people are very protective about their beliefs and they are not willing to like process new information as a rational person would. So there are like challenges in the sense that you are challenging people's protected beliefs. But if you can like convince people somehow, so then there are Pareto gains to be made.
Challenging indeed, but fascinating as well. Thank you very much for talking about your research.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Really enjoyed.
The paper is called Long Run Impacts of In-Utero Ramadan Exposure, Evidence from Administrative Tax Records, and the authors are Mazar Wazim and Timotei Shaker. You can download the paper by clicking on this link. And thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.